Only in one newspaper account does it say that Chester filled William Wallace's gun with water before William Wallace and his dog and Royal went out for that woods hunt. Only one reference to that. You know, the newspapers kind of transcribe Hattie's testimony over the different, but there's no record. It's not in this building. You know, the original transcription that the lawyer wrote down as they talked to Hattie. So where the Worcester Town Clerk's building is now in Worcester, right at the corner, that was built in 1911. There was a congregational church there originally, and that church is where William Wallace's funeral was held. The townspeople took up a collection for Hattie, and
No.
No?
Sorry, no.
Who took up a collection?
No, the location is right.
Oh, okay. Well, there wasn't a church right there at the. Where was the church?
At the corner, where the town hall now stands.
Isn't that what I said?
You said clerk.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
You're right. I'm sorry. Yes, the
So
town
many
hall,
details.
and then something, and then the clerks. All right.
Yes.
Yes. That big town hall, the old
Yes.
town hall building on the corner. There was a church there.
That's right.
That's where they held William Wallace's funeral. My question was, even though they thought his name was William Wallace McCormick, they had the Connecticut town of his dad, and his dad was seriously a well-known person. So how much effort would it have been to send a letter down to the postmaster of that town to say, this Indian man was just murdered up here, William Wallace McCormick? I mean, the family would have figured it out. I don't know, perhaps that happened. But in any case, they had a funeral, they raised money for Hattie. Hattie went back to her family, and then in 1912-ish, when good old Dorman D.E.B. Kent writes a story of this, he says that Hattie was the sole mourner at the funeral. I don't think that was true. At least I'd rather not think that's true. The earlier accounts say that they raised money at that funeral and gave it to Hattie. I like to think townspeople came out to that funeral. Yes.
So you said that originally, so these two cousins conspired to kill William Wallace because they wanted to get access to Hattie.
Yes.
But how did they find that out? Somebody interviewed her, or them? They confessed that to someone?
They both. Royal started to talk before they killed William Wallace. There's one account of Hattie and William Wallace being out in the community. Royal's talking to this guy, what's his name, like George Gouchea, and he says, I bet I could get that woman if I could get her away from that Indian.
And what was Hattie's ethnicity?
White.
Okay.
And she was described as uncommonly beautiful. Hattie, uncommonly beautiful, 18 but looked 16. Come to find out, it's because she really was just 16. And
Like the age difference, right?
yeah. So William Wallace was about 35. Hattie was 16. Not totally uncommon for that time period. I think that she truly loved him, and I think it was. And everybody kind of agreed in town that that's what was going on. And she says after the murder, at one point in the proceedings, later on down the road, that she doesn't regret a single minute of it, and that she did it for the love of William Wallace. However, by late 1880, when they finally get out of her that his name was actually Hazard, she says, well, what's the 19th century phrasing, that he had like despoiled her or whatever, and she was so ashamed that she ran off with him, and then she finally confesses that no, there was never any marriage. Because initially, I knew that there was no marriage in the town clerk, but I thought, well, gosh, Wells River is Newberry, and Newberry has a really strong, long-term Abenaki history, and what if William Wallace had some kind of indigenous connection, and what if there was some kind of ceremony, but it just wasn't sort of legal and official? But I don't think anything like that happened. They just told people in Worcester, Vermont that they had gotten married, but they did not, in fact, get married. And she didn't get pregnant. I don't know that William Wallace ever had any children with anybody. Hattie went back to her dad. She was working as a servant on a neighboring farm. She married a man. She then later on, at middle age, leaves that man and marries the man who was living with them as their hired farmhand, Arthur Carter, who was younger than Hattie. I mean, Hattie, uncommonly beautiful, you know. And so she dies before Arthur Carter. She dies in 1944, and she died without any children. There's one kind of vague reference to she and the first husband, Charles Jackman, having a stillborn or a baby who died as an infant. So perhaps that's true, but she died without any heirs. She herself had been an only child. So then this has required me to go back to her mom. Her mom had a brother. There are like all of these first cousins, and first cousins went through. Her Hattie's cousin had 9 kids. And so I'm trying to track all those people down. But you're basically saying your great-great-grandfather had a sister, and that sister had a daughter, and what do you know about her? I mean, people just don't know. You get really lucky if you get somebody like Martha who has a vast knowledge of the extended family history and just amazing research skills, or Rachel Purple, who definitely knows about the Carr family, but mostly when you contact people, they just don't know.
Where did Hattie die?
Hattie died in Lisbon, New Hampshire. She's buried in Littleton. And there were 4 pallbearers at the funeral, a couple of, I have tracked down all those pallbearers and hounded their relatives. Like, your relative was a pallbearer at this lady's funeral in 1944. What do you know about it? Do you think that's been very successful? Right. That has been.
And it was during the war. It was hard to get pallbearers.
Okay, that's a good, I didn't even think about that.
Well.
You're right, yeah. My friend Ginger thought I should put out an APB to all nursing homes in the
right.
area. Like, somebody in a nursing home must have known Hattie when that person was little and Hattie was old.
Wow.
You know, when I really let my imagination run wild, I think, well, what if there's a picture of William Wallace and Hattie? I mean, can you imagine? But no, I'm sure there's nothing even remotely like that.
You'll stay up tonight looking.
Yes, I'll look, yes. Yes, David?
2 other little details that you're probably already aware of, but I think would add a little bit to your presentation. Both of these are gallows comments.
Okay, let's hear it.
He was overheard to say as he stood near the gallows, all because of those 2 women.
Yes.
And a second thing is, the same article, I think, which was a New York paper, says that he was buried, the first person to be buried in the new cemetery.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's just no marker for him. But I'm certain that's where he is, up there in that hillside cemetery. They used to be buried in the grounds of the prison. The history of the Windsor State Prison is a whole other fascinating thing. What else am I forgetting to tell you? Oh, and so Royal and Chester, the both of them, started in on Hattie as soon as William Wallace was at, like, that day, that night. You know, Hattie, he doesn't take good care of you, I can dress you better, stay with me, we'll take care of you. This, you know, at Chester Carr's house, they were described as so profoundly impoverished.
Even told her that he had run off with another woman.
Yes, that's right. They said, how do you know? Yeah, he split. We went hunting. He went this way. I went that way. I think he let, you know, he's handsome and he likes other women better than he likes you, and I'm sure that he left. And, you know, for the Chester Carr family, they were so poor. They were all sleeping in the kitchen. I'm sure it's the only place that was even remotely warm, in 2 beds. They had 2 beds. So when William Wallace, in those first 24, 48 hours, it's Chester and his wife and the toddler with Hattie and cousin Royal in the house, in the kitchen with 2 beds. And Hattie had been to Newberry Seminary for at least 1 session. And she bragged when she was here that she was kind of from a well-to-do family and they had gold and things at home. Which when I told Cricket that in the woods of East Elmore, she said, well, that must have gone over really, which I'm sure it did. Like, you go to an impoverished rural community and the newspaper accounts are very interesting, because on the one hand there's, you know, a vein of sympathy for William Wallace. On the other hand, a couple of papers make the offhand comment, like, this was really tragic for Hattie and she clearly loved this man, but this was kind of an escape clause for her because look what her life would have become, taking up with sort of the vagabond Indian. You know, so there's that, which is very similar and same time period to, for example, the way Roland E. Robinson talks about the French Canadians lightly kind of skipping into Vermont from French Canada and being light-fingered, and not that anybody accused William Wallace of theft or anything like that, but being sort of carefree, not prone to consistent labor. These are the ways that a lot of old-time Yankee families talked about the French Canadian families coming down as well. You know, and then there's the whole, another way you could interpret it is like, so the pure white girl, sort of in her virtue, like preserving her virtue. That's a little bit, it works a little bit, it doesn't totally work for the story. Yes, ma'am.
I am racking my brain right now, but in some of the research that I've done in Middlesex, there are two African-American families up in Bear Swamp starting in the 1870s, and I think one of the women, her maiden name was Hazard.
Oh,
and I have to look
perfect.
that up, but
Yeah.
they were there in the 1870 census and they were gone by 1890.
Yeah.
Um,
It raises
No.
questions. Did William Wallace have cousins in
Yeah.
Vermont that he was aware of? Was Mary the connection? Did she say, I've got cousins in Vermont, let's go leave New Hampshire and go to
Yeah.
Vermont? I mean, yeah.
And that
But
part
there-
of Middlesex is right close to Worcester. You know, it's just a couple miles from the border.
Yeah, and it's funny because in the, you know, and you're getting, as Ray Gould points out, like you're getting the white journalist sort of spin on it, but he's described both as, you know, the quote half-breed Indian who's Scottish, and then in the same, at one point Royal says, why, to Hattie, why are you running around with that, quote, old N-word Indian? Which then, you know, N-word, that just means, like, that's a devaluing kind of statement. It didn't necessarily mean black, but it meant, like, lesser than me. Why are you running around with him? But did it. Because when I was doing the research, and I thought it was William Wallace Hazard, and then I was, kept bumping up into those Scottish references, didn't want to get too comfortable with my hunch that McCormick was Hazard, and yeah.
Good
What
job.
else?
I commend you on your research.
Fascinating.
Any other questions at all?
I do, but I could.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thanks so much to Jill. This was just totally fascinating. I'm amazed at how far you've gone with this. Yeah,